Hi there. Today I'm going to cut snowflakes again. I was having a comment conversation with Mary W. about how to cut fancy snowflakes. And not saying that mine are fancy, but I'm going to show you how I cut some of the snowflakes that I cut for the background on this page. Now, I did use some cardstock for this snowflake and one down over here, but I really would not recommend that because it is a thicker paper and it's a little bit harder to fold. I would recommend typing paper, just plain printer paper. I've been using this ruled paper out of the composition book simply because it was cheap. I kind of like my snowflakes large or larger. You might want to make a square. I was using a rectangle. If you make a square, if you have a rectangle sheet of paper, just fold one edge over like this. That should make a square. Get my scissors out here. Just cut this portion off. Now, I don't pay attention to whether they're five-sided snowflakes or four-sided snowflakes or anything like that, because to me, every snowflake is unique. Okay, did you see what I did here? I had my paper, rectangular sheet of paper. I wanted a square instead of a rectangle, so I just folded it over like this. It made a diagonal. And then trim this piece off. And it probably won't be exactly totally square, but it's pretty much a square. Okay, so you fold it diagonally. And then just fold it again. And again. And I think I'll give it one more fold. Now, if you give it one more fold, what's going to happen is you're going to have a short end and a long end, and this is going to be your long end here. Now, you can leave it like that if you want, but I really do kind of like to trim that off. And so I think I'm going to do that. Just trim it off like, just cut that rectangular piece off. Now, you even might, if this paper is thin enough, that I could probably even fold half of this over this way. Now, I just play with it. I'm not saying this is the correct way. I don't know correct ways. See what I did? I had it like this, and I folded half of it this way, and then I'm going to fold the other half back on itself that way. And that just makes a nice skinny piece. And you might even want to trim this off again here. You might want to make a circle out of it. Now, I was telling Mary that to get these really nice fancy edges, to pretend like you're doing icicles. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to pretend like I'm cutting some icicles here. And you may not want to cut them ultra deep, but you want them deep enough that you can tell that they're going to be fancy. And it will get kind of squishy in there, and you might cut some off. Don't worry about it. Just keep playing with it until you get it. And I might have this folded too much to be a good icicle, but we'll see. Yeah, you want to get all those papers out of there, so that you have fancy edges. There. See what I have? Little icicles on the edges here and here, and a big thick one there. Now, I think I'm going to thin that thick one out a little by just trimming it down the sides. Then, you just want to kind of cut pretty little. And it helps to have a nice pair of strong scissors. These Tim Holtz scissors are ideal for cutting really thick pieces like this, and expect to get all these little paper shards. Remember when we had paper ballot voting and there were the controversy with the paper shards? And just kind of cut pretty little. You can make them, like I've got little diamonds in here. You can make them longer if you wanted. Like I'm going to cut a long piece down here. Just cut that, trim that piece right off in there. And then the point, you can make it as, the higher up you cut it, the bigger center you're going to have. The lower down you cut it, the smaller center you're going to have. And I always cut it on a diagonal. You may want to do that to both sides. Be careful here, because you don't want to completely cut through it. See what I did there? See how I cut a circle in there, and I cut a curve in there, and two little diamonds there, and what I call little icicles on the edges there. Now let's cut another kind of like a diamond shape out of here. And you can cut from both directions. And remember, this is just a piece of composition paper. If you goof, you goof. You know, okay, let's unfold it and see what I have here. Unfolding it gets to be the trick, doesn't it? Look at that. Isn't that fun? There's half of it. There we go. See what it did to the center there? And look at, there's all my little icicle edges. So, let's push all these little shards off. Wasn't that fun? Now, kind of depends on what you're going to do with these. I used a liquid matte medium and put mine down on the background paper. So I was able to glue these down really easy because my glue was wet. Let's do that again with this piece. Let's start all over from scratch. Here's my rectangular piece of paper. I want to make a square out of it, so I'm just going to take the edge and fold it up. Diagonally and trim it off. Okay, so there's my square. Fold it diagonally. Fold that diagonal in half. Like that. Keep folding it in half. And because this is thin paper, you can do this. With cardstock, it would be harder. Let's fold it in half one more time. So you're getting this little triangular shape. But see how here, how this is the shorter end and this is the longer end? You could probably leave that, but I don't like to. I like to trim that long piece off. So this time, well, no, let's just trim it this way again. Just trimmed it off. Okay, then what I do is I take half of it, here it is, and I take this half and fold it back on itself this way. This is how I do it. I'm not saying this is the correct way to do it. Okay, and then I flip it over and I fold the other side back on itself. So you have this really thin piece of wedge of paper that's several layers thick. And again, because I folded it back on itself, I've got this extra piece in here that I like to trim off. In fact, I like to make it a kind of a circle when I trim it. And you could leave it a circle like that, and then instead of the pretty icicle edges, you'd have scalloped edges. But I like to make icicle edges. So let's do that again. Only I'm going to try to cut them a little deeper this time. I'm going to cut them way deep. Cut them way deep down into there. So I went about an inch down. And then you just cut out another wedge out of it. You want to be sure you get all those little center pieces pulled out. That's kind of, I think, the hardest part. There. And, you know, expect it to be, what do you say, raggedy. Okay. So I'm going to only do this one more time. Over on the other side here. I want to go way down deep. You might kind of want to hold it as you're trimming it. Gets a little, you have to have some dexterity to do this. And don't worry if you snip part of it off. You'll get it eventually. Now, as I said, the higher up that you trim it here, the bigger center you're going to have. And I don't like to have really huge centers. I like to trim mine down, and I trim it on a diagonal, but I like to trim it close to the point. Now I need the pretty little curves in here. Right there. Can you see what I did right there? Made a little nick in it right here. Let's do the same thing on the other side. Okay, now let's cut some. I like to cut the curves. And you're going to get different results every time you do this. And you can see where my paper is not even here. I've got on the underneath, I've got a wider sheet than I do on top because it's folded over on each other. But I still just cut it. That just means some circles will be deeper than the others in here. And this gets a little hard. It's not, kind of have to hold on to it and trim it. Now I went pretty deep with that. So the other one I want to start up here where it's not, and maybe just kind of hard to turn it, but there. Now see what I have there? Kind of looks like a stork scissors in a way, doesn't it? The stork scissors, embroidery scissors. How that's the shank of the scissors down here, and this is the blades. I'm thinking that I want a couple of little nicks in here without cutting through it disaster-like. Okay, let's open it up and see what I have. Let's get all this out of the way. Opening it up, I think, is the most fun because each one's different. You never really get the exact same result. Look at that. Isn't this fun? And, whoops. There we go. What did I do with my other one? 2 snowflakes. What fun is this? Hang them on your trees. I think Carol M said that they made banners and hung them from the window, from the big picture window. Wouldn't that be pretty? And cheap. I mean, who cares if it has lines in there? You could put glitter on there. Just, hey, they're snowflakes. So, break out the composition pad, composition book, cheap paper. Get out your scissors, do some folding and snipping, and make some icicles around the edges. That makes them nice and frilly. Now you could do other things too. You could do the scallops. Imagine you could do a scallop even with a little circle in it if you wanted to. But I like it like this. I like the big scallopy edges. The icicle edge. I like the big icicle edges. So, thank you for watching. And I will see you on the next page.